Welcome back, everybody, to the O Show podcast, episode 389, presented by Mayweather Boxing and Fitness in Scottsdale. Coming soon here in the heart of Scottsdale, Arizona. Mayweather Boxing and Fitness offers an authentic experience for those who want to learn from Floyd Money Mayweather's techniques and training regimens while also getting in the best shape of their lives in a high-intensity group fitness setting. Again, they opened up for construction on July 9th. Equipment was just delivered this week. It should be opening up sometime in the fall. Again, that is Mayweather Boxing and Fitness in Scottsdale, Arizona. Our guest today knows something in those lines. He's the host of the Top Rated MMA podcast. He is Erik Allen. Thanks so much for joining the program, man.
Oh, so pumped to be here, man. Thank you for this opportunity, dude.
I mean, we talked about it briefly just a second ago, but absolutely love the beard. You don't plan on trimming it anytime soon. I think one of the original beards that I saw growing up as a kid was Brian Wilson. He was a pitcher for the San Francisco Giants, and it was just like down to the floor. I'm like, I hope to have a beard like that one day. I'm not quite there with my facial hair. You know, I could grow it enough to where it, you know, comes down to maybe where my microphone's at.
Okay.
But that's about it.
That's awesome.
So you host two podcasts, correct? You have the MMA show, and then you just have the Erik Allen show too, right?
Yep, both shows, man. Erik Allen show comes out every Friday, and Top Rated MMA show comes out every Saturday.
And do you like to differentiate the two, like keep them separated? One's just strictly mixed martial arts, the other you just, of course, like talking to people from all over the world.
Yeah, it's very different. So Top Rated MMA is really where I highlight up-and-coming MMA fighters from around the world, and so love being able to kind of get their story out there. And really, I started the podcast because I wanted to ask fighters, why do you want to get in a cage and get punched in the face? Yeah. And the Erik Allen show is really where I talk with entrepreneurs, world changers, and success-minded people, and almost the same question I asked of them is, why do you want to get punched in the face? Hopefully not physically, but virtually. We get no's, rejected, you know, we get shut down all the time, but why do we keep going as entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I mean, that's 100% something that I definitely look into when I'm looking at podcasts and things to go into. There's the show right there. I don't think that's your show.
That is not my show.
That's Erik with a C.
Erik with a C, but that's okay.
I'll be sure to beat my video guys up after this, but that's no good. Awesome. But you know, your shows, you know, we were talking before, you know, Jim the Rookie Morris, an inspiring guest right there. You have Rob Lawless as well, you know, talking to 10,000 different strangers, because you never really know who you're going to meet. And especially with shows like this, like you and I connected over email, over social media. We saw each other's stuff. Like, we've never met in person. Like, we could say we're strangers, and here we are talking. Like, you never know who you're going to meet and what type of words you're going to be inspired by.
Yeah. I love podcasting, man. I'm fascinated with people's stories and really had no idea what I was doing. The first 100 episodes were in a walk-in closet, you know, and then like the more people that I talked to, especially on the Erik Allen show and fighter stories, I was like, man, I got to share this stuff out there, man. So, yep.
Oh, they got it right this time.
Yes.
That's definitely you.
Yes. That is the Erik Allen show.
Again, I'll beat the crap out of him next time. I don't know if that was, there he is. Zach Kelly, our video guy.
That's awesome.
But, I mean, yeah, I talked to Jim Morris just, again, like last week, and I said it was one of the most inspirational interviews I've had, because, again, his story, if you don't know who he is, the movie The Rookie with Dennis Quaid is inspired by him and his story, everything that he went through, right?
Yep. He's such a great guy, man, and just in person and on, like, I mean, you've had the same conversation with him on his show, but, like, he's so real, and I love that he just keeps fighting. He's being in the best shape that he is in, almost 60 years old. He beat Parkinson's, man. His story's unbelievable.
Now, when it comes to your MMA show, is it specifically designed to, again, get the word out about young and up-and-coming fighters who are, you know, coming through the ranks? And obviously, if in fighting, and this is what I appreciate about fighting, is that it starts and ends with you, you know? Like, it's not necessarily a team sport. You have your team that you train with. But at the end of the day, when you step foot in that octagon, it starts and ends with you. Everything's on you in that moment, as opposed to, like, in baseball, you hit 3 home runs and drive in 10 runs that day, and you still lose 11-10 because, your pitching staff didn't pitch well, you know? Like, that's what the one thing I appreciate about mixed martial arts is that it comes down to you. And when you're interviewing these guys, what exactly are you looking for? You know, when it comes to just like talking about their lives, what got them to that moment, or is it more about, you know, the technique of their fighting styles?
So I very much love going into the backstory first. So the first question I ask on both of my shows is really like, tell me where you grew up and what was childhood like for you? One, because I want the listeners that are listening to my show to understand that the people I'm talking to, they're just real people anyways. Like they're real people that either they had a bunch of failures and they got to where they're at, or they had this perfect life and they had some dips and now they're back up, and they had to struggle through, everybody struggles through something. And so I love to ask that question right off the bat. And so I really like to focus on the mindset. How are you feeling backstage before you walk out to that cage, before you get locked in there against another person that wants to hurt you physically? What is going through your mind? How do you prep for that mentally? How do you cut weight? What's that process look like? So I like talking about that. I do talk about their upcoming fights if they have some, but I really liked the story. How'd you get into this? What was the reaction from your family and your friends, when you told them I want to go fight in a cage? Some of them are like, oh yeah, they knew I was going to do it. And then some are like, they were totally shocked. I think quit talking to me, it's all over the spectrum.
Right. And the more they talk, the more you're intrigued by certain things. The one thing I've learned, as an interviewer, you can almost sympathize with other people from certain situations that they've gone through in their lives, whether it be professional stuff, personal stuff. And you can actually be like, oh, I kind of know how that feels. I had that stingy feeling once, and then you can go off of that.
Right.
Have you, developed some of those skills as you continue to interview people?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I'm always trying to learn. I have this thing on my wall here that says canny or constant and never ending improvement. And Ed Milet told me that when I was talking to him. And, it's just one of those things that stuck with me. And so I think every show I try to get better and better at asking better questions, having a better flow, and really just being more professional on each and every show. And now, getting close to 400 shows total between my two shows. I feel like I'm constantly improving though. Do
you remember your first show?
I do. Yeah. So the first show I did was with a buddy of mine from the UK. He just did jiu-jitsu. And I'm like, hey man, I'm thinking about doing this podcast. Would you just join me on the show? And walk-in closet. I didn't even look in the camera. I was looking at the screen the whole time. I was had a bad microphone, had one of those snowball mics, and no lighting, bad lighting, man. It was interesting.
I mean, that was me when I first started my show. I was more focused on what my set in my basement was going to look like. We have a bar in our basement. And I'm like, we got to put the flat screen here. We got to put some boxing gloves over there. And then as soon as we hit record, my brother and I, who used to be my co-host way back in the day, was like, we have no idea what to do. We didn't even have a topic of discussion, and we hit record.
Yeah.
It's we just had the passion to do it, I guess, but at the same time was not prepared whatsoever. And here we are 389 episodes later talking to you. So
come on, man. That's awesome.
We didn't quit, which is the most important thing.
Yep.
So I do want to talk to you about, some of your experiences that kind of cultivated what you do now. Because obviously you have a passion for MMA. You have a passion for, inspiration stories, that we've been talking about. You growing up, going through some of the difficult things that you went through leading to this. If you can give a brief description about some of the things that you went through. Again, it's stuff, touchy stuff. I don't want to get too deep into it if you don't want to, but is there anything that you'd like to add to, that statement of, I was once here, went through all this shit, been to hell and back, and then obviously popped out well on the other side?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in typical household, went to Sunday school, played Little League, right? My parents got divorced when I was 11. My mom got together with a guy who was very physically abusive, moved us to small town Montana. And when one night they came home fighting and arguing, it wasn't anything different, but something in my heart was like, dude, you got to turn around. And I remember this moment being 13 years old, and I looked down the hallway and he's on top of my mom and he's just like, boom, boom, boom. I'm like, I got to get this guy off, and grabbed a cast iron pan out of the cupboard, man, and swung as hard as I could. And I split the back of his head open, and he turned around. And as he said that, he was like, what? And I hit him in the forehead, split his forehead open, and still didn't knock him out. He was so drunk, but I was essentially kicked out of the house at that point. I had 3 months left of my freshman year of high school, and led me down this path of destruction for the next 10 years. I was arrested at 18. I was bankrupt at 21. I was homeless basically between 18 and 21. I moved 21 different times, battled addictions while in the music business. And then in 2004, I got sober, and man, here we are today. I mean,
that's crazy. I mean, you got kicked out for defending your mother. Was that more of just I don't even know how to explain that. Cause again, I can't even imagine going through something like that where you thought you were doing the right thing and then you paid for it.
Yes. Yeah. It was kind of interesting, man. That's for sure. And, I think at the time I was like, seriously? What's going on? I only had 3 months left. I was sleeping on my buddy's floor. His name was Forrest, man. We'd walk to school. We'd steal cigarettes from his dad, walking to school. And, it's just led me down this crazy path, like I said, man.
So what were some of those experiences in the music industry that you mentioned?
Yeah, so I was working at a CD store when those were around. One called FYE. I don't even know if those are still around at all. But one guy walked into the store. He worked for Universal Records, and I jokingly said, "Hey man, how do I get your job?" And he said, "Oh, you got to be an intern at the community college, and you got to go apply here." And so I went down to the community college, and I paid $320 for this internship class. Got the teacher to sign off that I had registered and paid, and I took that receipt to Universal Records. Said, "Look, I'm in college, never went to a class." And I got hired on as an intern with Universal Records. And I just showed up every day for 6 months, like stuffing posters and stuff like that. And then after 6 months, they're like, "Oh, dude, we should probably hire him." So I got hired on as a mailroom coordinator. I was tracking sales and setting up meet and greets. And so the summer before that, my buddy was the manager of an outdoor venue out in Washington called The Gorge. So I had this 2-year span where I went to about 175 concerts, open tab at every single one of them, living the rock star lifestyle without essentially even know how to play a note of music.
Yeah. Wow. I'd probably be in the same boat then. I have no idea. I've come from, my brother plays every instrument imaginable, like really well too. Not
Nice.
just saying that as his brother, but like very talented in what he does. And I have no idea how to even, I don't even know the certain chords to play guitar. No clue.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I love live music, but I don't know how to play any of it.
no. Are you a big rock guy? I got my Guns N' Roses t-shirt on today.
I do. Yeah, dude. I grew up, I grew up in the era of like Korn and Rob Zombie and, Tool and those guys, man, still some of my favorite bands. And I think working at Universal, they kind of forced me to listen to other types of music and genres and stuff like that. So my eyes and ears have opened up to other, music, but I'm still rock at heart for sure.
Who was, I forget his name. It was Jordanson, the drummer from Slipknot, just died yesterday, I think, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Joey Jordison,
Joey
I think is his first
Jordison,
name.
yeah. Founder of Slipknot with Corey Taylor. I don't know what happened. He was 46, I think.
Yeah, I didn't see much. I only saw one thing that posted up that said he passed away peacefully in his sleep. So
Which
I don't know
can
what
mean
that means,
anything, right?
Yeah. It's interesting. Slipknot was a rad band, man. I actually saw them play at the second stage of Ozfest 1998 or 1999. And there was maybe 100 people that were watching them. And I was out in the crowd. I was standing back behind the mosh pit. And it was the craziest thing. This dude literally runs past me with an axe in his hand, running towards the pit. And I was like, what the hell just happened? Like security tackled him right in front of me. It was crazy. But it was cool to see those guys, like literally, like nobody was watching these guys play. And I was working at a CD store, so I knew who they were. I was like, dude, we got to check these guys out. One of the best live shows I've seen, especially on a second stage, man.
See, I feel like you can't really have those experiences anymore, at least in the rock genre. Like there's some guys would be like, "Oh, I saw The Weeknd perform live in New York City at this pub back in 2012." It's like, that's not the same thing. Like I can only imagine like hearing like Pearl Jam when they were, I forget their original name, Mookie Blaylock, performing like just at some random pub in Seattle before they made it huge, right?
Yeah, I lucked out on a couple of them, man. I saw Linkin Park on their first U.S. tour for $10 out in Seattle, and I saw Kings of Leon play with 70 people on their first tour way back in the day in 2003, man. And both of those bands, obviously, who they are today, but it was really cool to see those guys in the early days, man.
That's unbelievable. And has your, I guess in my life, music's a big factor because I don't play it, but it has definitely shaped who I am when it comes to certain mentalities. Being like a huge rock and roll guy, has music definitely formed your mentality, whether it's like working out in a gym or just doing daily things?
Yeah, for sure. I hate the sound of silence, man. I always have something jamming in the house. My wife and kids, we always have music playing downstairs on the Apple TV, man. And so like always constantly have music going. I don't like to just drive on the road and look out the window, man. I like always have to have my music going for sure, dude.
And I feel like in MMA, it's like always heavy stuff too they're coming out to. Unless you're like Mickey Gall. Like I remember when Mickey Gall, because I'm a big WWE guy, and when CM Punk made his UFC debut, that was his first fight with Mickey Gall, right?
Right.
And he came out to that, I don't even know what it's called, but like, "Hey, Mickey, you're so fine."
Right.
That song. And this guy's a fighter. A very talented fighter, too. Scary fighter, and that's the song he's coming out to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think Dana White like denied it at first, but he's like, "You know what, Mickey, I'll throw you this bone." And he came out to that song and absolutely wiped the floor with CM Punk.
Totally.
It was so, and we were at a Buffalo Wild Wings, me and my buddy, huge wrestling fans.
Yeah.
We wanted to see that fight because he quit WWE just out of nowhere, and he was like everyone's favorite. So it was a big deal for him to jump over to the UFC, like a guy with no MMA experience. I know he trained for a few years leading up to it, but he just did not look like a fighter in the octagon.
Sure.
And I remember my buddy putting down like $200 with one of our other friends. He's like, $200, Punk knocks him out in the first round. I'm like, dude, you are going to be so disappointed.
Totally.
And it looked so bad. So bad to the point where even Dana White's just like, we'll probably never see him again. Joe Rogan gave him like no credit on his podcast, just being like, CM Punk did not belong here. He doesn't belong in mixed martial arts.
Yeah.
That was definitely painful to watch. Have you ever, seen any one of these fighters, these up-and-comer fighters that you've interviewed, get in the octagon and just it did not work out for them?
No, I mean, I don't know if I've seen someone get in there and then it just not working out for them. A lot of these guys, they either just kind of fade out or they continue to go. And so I would say the majority of the fighters that I've talked to, they tend to keep fighting on the regional circuit. Actually, Brady Heistan and Josh Radenhouse, both in the Tough House right now, both have been on my show. And I've met both of those guys in person several times out here because they're from the area where I'm at. But I don't know if I've seen anybody actually get in there and just have a flop career. Now, there was a streak where I think early on it was like this almost curse, I thought, where I'd have these up and coming fighters on my show and then they'd go on to lose, a couple of times. But I don't remember their names. We had John Prince Albert was the first signed fighter to our podcast. We started in 2012 as an apparel company. We signed him on as a fighter we sponsored him. And it was like the height right after the Ultimate Fighter when he was on the house. And then he goes on this 3-fight losing streak and he lost all his fans and he ended up, retiring from MMA at that point. But it was cool to have him as our first signed sponsor at that time. And our debut event where we had a booth set up, no one knew who we were. John Prince Albert shows up wearing all of our gear. We sponsored the main event fighter, so we made a good impact back there in 2012, man.
So how does it go from apparel company to podcast? Going from literally retail to, a communications gig when it comes to podcasting and being an interviewer.
Really bad business mistakes, not knowing what I was doing in the apparel game, man. Spent a lot of money on product, had no idea, paying a bunch of money for, low minimum, low quantities, things like that. In 2015, I got bored. I literally put an ad in Craigslist and said, who wants to buy this company? And, you get all the branding and the followers and all that stuff. And one guy called me up in 2015 and offered me a couple grand. And in that call, I decided I wasn't ready to quit. So I spent the next year kind of ho-humming it about. And then in 2017, we launched the Top Rated MMA podcast. And I think episode 239 or 240 drops this weekend. Wow.
So again, you've come a long way as well with your show. And obviously we talked about interviewing skills earlier on. Is there any specific fighter that you'd like to have on? Because again, you talked to up and comers, but at the same time, I'm sure you'd love to pick someone's brain today who's kind of thriving, whether it be in the UFC or Bellator, coming through the ranks when it comes to stepping foot in the octagon.
Yeah, I do talk to these up-and-coming fighters. I also talk to, bigger names when I can get them. I've had Ken Shamrock on the show twice. Yeah. Amazing guy there. I think my all-time favorite guy to have on the show would be Nate Diaz or Donald Cerrone. One of those guys I think are probably my favorite fighters in the UFC and just in general in MMA. So it'd be really great to have those guys on the show at some point.
Two completely different personalities too. I feel like Cerrone would definitely be someone who would be honored to come on the show. He'd be respectful. You'd have a great, intelligent conversation. And then you look at the Diaz brothers, fresh out of where they're from. Stockton, California. I almost said Compton. What is it, 606 or 609, the area code that they so proudly wear? He would literally just come on and just freestyle rap and you wouldn't be able to understand anything that he was saying.
Totally. It'd make for a great show, though, either way.
I remember those promos and press conferences they did for those two McGregor fights. Obviously, it helps when you have Conor McGregor who knows how to cut a promo during those press conferences, and it kind of worked well. They definitely had good chemistry on the mic, back and forth. But Nate Diaz just trash talking when he's going up against a Dustin Poirier who doesn't trash talk at all. It's just what are you saying, dude? It's not even working. It's not even remotely entertaining to watch this right now.
Right.
So it would be interesting to have him on as a guest. You definitely have to ask the right questions in order to get the right responses out of him. Because I feel like he would definitely be a yes or no answer guy if you asked him a yes or no question.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, and you know this, like the trick is to get them talking about what they like, right? So
Yeah.
do some research and figure out what exactly he's into, like the triathlons and like, you know, what kind of weed is he smoking this week, right? Like get him, get him to ask those, you know, ask those questions and hopefully get him talking.
That's the unique thing I think about, podcasts today that some people do so well. Like you have a celebrity on, it doesn't matter what industry they're from, like talk about something they're interested in. Don't talk about what they do, because they always talk about what they do on television, like leave that to the broadcasts. If you ever have someone in here, like I remember big wrestling fan again, Chris Jericho had Slash on his podcast or whatever. He's like, we talked about Ninja Turtles for an hour and a half. Like I'm not going to talk to him about, what he's doing with his new record or like if he's ever going to get back together with Axel. Like we're going to talk about stuff that he wants to talk about. Like I have Slash in here with me in studio. We're going to talk about whatever the hell he wants to talk about because that's content that nobody else is going to have.
Yep. Yeah. I heard a guy this last weekend, Dan Fleischman, and I was at a mastermind last week, and he said, put out content that your listeners want to listen to. Don't put out content that you want to hear.
Exactly. And then you probably, have learned throughout your time as an interviewer, like asking specific questions that you didn't think you were going to ask going in to a guy like Jim Morris, who talks about a certain story that you didn't expect him to talk about. And then you end up having a conversation that's so much more deep and meaningful than anything that you had prepared.
Totally. Yeah. I try to prepare some questions when I do interviews, but I've done interviews where like I had Vincent Rocco, one of my first shows for the Erik Allen show. It used to be called The Bearded Biz, and we changed the name a few months back. But, like he's on my ends and he's done quite a few movies and things like that. But we had scheduled a time to talk and I was going to prepare and do some research and things like that. And then he got the time like messed up. And so he just like Zoomed me. And like I was like sitting at my desk, happened to be doing some work. And he's like, are you ready? And I was like, what? Oh, crap. So I just like free flowed that whole interview, man. It was 45 minutes of just him and I just going back and forth. Probably one of the coolest interviews I've ever done.
And those are the best conversations, too, just going back and forth. Kind of like you and I right now. We've already touched on like 10 different subjects, I feel like, in the first 20 minutes. But like, as an interview, like, do you have like a specific thing? Because again, we are not the Howard Sterns or the Joe Rogans of the world. Like when people are consuming content, you think like, okay, like 20 minutes someone can consume easily. But like when you're talking to someone, you really don't know the amount of time that's going to be putting into it. Like some conversations are 90 minutes, some are 20 minutes. Like, do you ever pay attention to that stuff when you're, again, trying to distribute content for your shows?
So I do pay attention to the time a little bit because I like to keep my shows no longer than 30 minutes. Yeah. And my MMA show runs about 15 to 25 minutes, I would say, on average. And the Erik Allen show probably pushes 25 to 35 minutes at most after I get in my introduction and stuff like that. But yeah, so I really try to crunch as much information as I can into that 30 minutes time, especially when you have guys like Ed Milet or, Sean Whalen on the show, things like that. Those guys are busy. So I want to get as much information as I can out of them within that 30 minutes and honor their time. And that's part of my strategy too, when I'm booking them on the interview or inviting them to come on the show, is I'm like, hey, my show is only going to run 30 minutes at most. I'd love to have you on. Let's promote this or that you happen to be doing right now. And let's make it happen. And that's how I booked all of my guests.
And some guys like that, like I'm in the same boat, like you with Ed Milet. Like I've had Jordan Belfort or like a David Meltzer who's literally like, yeah, I'll carve out 20 minutes. And it's literally like I look back after like hanging up on a Zoom call and it's like, oh my God, 20 minutes on the dot or like 20:01. I'm like, how did they do that? Because I feel like in that 20-minute time period, and they're masters at this, probably takes years to learn this skill. I got everything I wanted out of those interviews, and they were only 20 minutes long.
Yes.
Where like some interviews go like 55 minutes, hour 5, and you think like, I still had so much more to talk about. But those guys were able to crunch, an hour worth of conversation into 20 minutes. And I left like, that was the best interview I've ever done.
Totally.
It's insane.
I love it, man. Absolutely.
I mean, do you ever feel like that with some of, your interviews? Like you talk about like Ed Milet, who like I feel like is just go, go, go. Like, all right, I'll give you a half hour or so. And then he just like knocks everything, like all those bullet points you had and more. And he did it in under 30 minutes.
Yeah, I think, I definitely try to be strategic with that. I, again, really want to honor their time, especially when I'm having these bigger names, guys on the show. Greg Reed, Bedros Keuilian, Brad Lee, Tim Story, Eric LeGrand, all those guys, Jim, the Rookie Morris have all been on my show. And I really try to get in there and go, okay, I'm going to set aside a couple questions I want to ask, but I'm going to leave some spare time for us to be, free flow some conversation and things like that. And I'm constantly like going, okay, I'm peeking down at my clock. Oddly enough, my screens for us are down below. So I am actually just zoomed right into this camera, but I can't actually see you unless I look down here. So that's what I'm like constantly doing that throughout the interview. I'll kind of peek down and check out the time. Okay, I got 5 minutes left. All right, I got to ask this question, things like that.
Yeah, because there's certain things that like you forget about. Like you get into conversation and it's like, oh my God, I forgot like the biggest thing I wanted to ask him, and you only have like 5 minutes left, right?
I've had those for sure. Yeah.
And you talk about the clock, like thank God I work in a studio. We got a clock right there. It's like literally right next to the camera, so I can both talk to you and there's a camera right there, or a clock right there, so I can tell. Do you have any like big dream guests, like even if they're unattainable at the moment, like a few years down the road that you'd love to talk to?
Tony Robbins is my all-time favorite. I think Tony Robbins, Les Brown, those two guys are super big. Like I have them on my walls. Like, I stare at them every morning. I'm like, okay, I will talk to Tony on my podcast. I will talk to Ed Milet on my podcast. I will talk to Les Brown. Part of my morning routine is really just speaking into existence things that I want to just manifest, man.
Now, what inspires you specifically? Obviously, Tony Robbins, one of the biggest, motivational, inspirational speakers out there with everything that he's experienced in his life and everything that he gives back. But, like, what about, you and your experiences kind of, like, touched on you for that and wanted you to be like, okay, I cannot wait to talk to this guy one day?
I think he was probably one of the first guys that I heard that was really this motivational speaker. At an early age, I remember like seeing him on TV and he would be talking and just fired up, talking about mindset and things like that. So, I've always been this entrepreneurship mindset guy. When I was 10 years old and 11 years old, I had 2 summers where I was mowing lawns and I had about 15 clients and I was, at the time racking in like $120 a week, mowing yards, and it was awesome. But, so I think early on I came across Tony Robbins, so I've just kind of always followed him. And then, of course, he mentioned Jim Rohn, and then I was like, oh, man, who's Jim Rohn? And then it just went on and on. But I think he's definitely one of those guys that I love what he does. And him being like 65 years old, I think is about where he's at right now. Like he's still out there every day, still in the best shape, still motivating people. Funny thing out here in Coeur d'Alene, I have my Top Rated MMA logo kind of has the TR that Tony Robbins has. I did not realize that my logo was pretty similar to his. And I was putting groceries away at the Costco up here one day, and I had the TR logo from Top Rated on my shirt. And this couple pulled up behind me and said, "Oh, we saw your jet at the airport." And I was like, "I have a jet?" And they're like, "No, yeah, it's big. It's got your logo, the same logo on your shirt out there." And I was like, trying to think, rack my brain, like, who could it be? And I was like, oh, that must be Tony Robbins. So he was in town one day, but someone confused my shirt with his jet.
Oh, that's awesome. And that would be an awesome icebreaker right off the bat for you.
Totally,
just to save in your back pocket for you to have whenever you get in touch with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you, not to give away all the secrets here, but how do you, reach out to potential guests for coming on your show? Because again, like you have some guys who are willing to come on freely, and then you have the Ed Milets of the world where you got to get in touch with their people in order to get to them.
Never have worked through people unless they've asked me to.
Yeah.
But I will say this. I book 99% of my guests through Instagram Messenger, and I do not send a template message. I don't send a message like typed up or anything like that. I literally pull out my phone and I do a 30-second video. Ed, what's going on? It's Erik Allen. I know you got a house out here in Coeur d'Alene, dude, but I saw videos of it. It's amazing. I saw you pushing this book. Let's get you on the show and promote that a little bit. Thanks. We'll talk soon.
30 seconds. That's so personable too. And it's quick.
Yep.
You know what you're going to say. He can feel your energy in a sense. Again, like over Zoom, like we can communicate because we can sort of understand each other's body language. Like it's not the same, being in studio or being in the same place at the same time. But at least you get that sense like, oh, this is a cool guy. He's not just some, inexperienced kid,
Right.
Because sometimes you think like, oh, God, college student. I have 3 interviews under my belt. Probably going to sound very monotone like this the entire time. Like, is that really worth my time,
Yeah, I think, the videos help. That's how I've booked, Bedros, Cohen, and Bradley, and every single one of them has responded back like, hey, because I usually do with this backdrop. So every single one of them respond back, like the flag, like the beard. I'm like, all right, I got something going.
You got your brand, yeah.
So that's how I've been able to lock them in. And some of them will say, hey, can you email this email address and let's lock it in? Or some are like, yep, let's do it. And then I just send them my calendar link and say, pick out a date and we lock it in, man.
How'd you like Brad Lee? He's the dropping bombs guy, right?
Yeah, that dude is a stud, man. Like so cool, down to earth. His story is unbelievable. The way that he still continues to teach and through his light speed, courses and things like that. And I have, access to his closer school, which I've gone through and gotten certified through his closing school, man. And like, I love that he is just real with sales. Like he's been doing sales so long. It's like, he knows it like no better than anybody else. Right. But he is amazing at it. He's really spoke to me about tips and how to do things and how to, put things into play that I can enhance my skill set and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, he's such a great dude.
I love how brutally honest he is too, like with his content and everything that you see. Like you tell, like he's speaking from the heart. That's why it seems so natural and so cool, Like he is Mr. Cool when it comes to, making sales and everything that he does. Because he was a high school dropout, I believe, right?
Yep, absolutely.
That is insane. He's definitely one of the guests I'd love to have on the show as well. Bradley dropping bombs. I started to listen to that podcast during COVID, because like that's when, everything stops and you're looking for inspiration for certain things.
Yeah.
When you're like in the middle stages of your show, like when COVID hits, you think like, okay, like everybody can talk now. Like as a podcast host, you're like, okay, there's really no excuse to not want to talk to me. Were there any big guests that you had during that time period that you didn't think that you probably could have gotten during normal circumstances?
I mean, all of those guys, right? Like I had 2020 for me was probably the best year podcasting ever.
Same.
So I was able to talk all those guys in 2020. And Craig Ballantyne, another guy that I hope to have on my show at one point, we were lined up to have, and then he had to reschedule it. And then now my calendar's booked out quite a bit, but like Craig Ballantyne is one of those guys that I was hoping to get on the show, but he's got this book called Perfect Day Formula. So highly recommend people go check that out. But him and Bedros Keuilian, really tight knit, and they have an awesome podcast as well. But, I think all those guys that I've booked, Erik LeGrand, Bradley, all those guys, they all came on in 2020. It really helped me kick off 2021 and the end of 2020 in a really awesome way.
Like it not only builds like what you're doing, but it builds your own skills. Cause now, you could talk to these people and reach out to other people and be like, I'm credible enough to reach out to some of these bigger names to come on my platform to talk about certain things.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, prior to having Ed Milet, I had already talked to Sean Whalen on my show. That guy's probably one of the coolest dudes I've ever had on the show. And him and I were just chit-chatting for 45 minutes, man. It was like one of the coolest, down-to-earth. He like brought his mom on and was like, hey, this is my mom. Like just a really cool, down-to-earth guy. And then I had reached out to Ed, and I actually won Ed Milet's Max Out Challenge in 2018. And that's how I got the phone call with Ed. And then I was able to record that and release that as an episode. It was episode 12 of my show. And I think episode 111 drops this weekend, man, of the Erik Allen show.
So this is a two-part question. Since we're on the topic of, getting guests and like connecting with people, you talk about some of these like big-time guests thinking like, oh my God, like I'm kind of anxious getting ready to talk to these people. And then all of a sudden you're like, this is the nicest person in the world. Like such down to earth. Like they're just like me. Yeah. Have you had, who's like the nicest guy that you've had on that you weren't expecting to have on? And who was like the biggest, just arrogant jerk that you had on that you were not expecting to be an arrogant jerk?
I've been really blessed. I haven't had anybody on my show that was an arrogant jerk.
Really?
Yeah, I really haven't. Everybody that I've had on my show has been really cool to me. I think the one time that I talked to Ed Milet, 2 hours prior to that interview, I interviewed Ken Shamrock for the first time. Wow. So it was like this amazing day where I was like, holy crap, I get to talk to two of the biggest names in the world back to back today. And so I was a little bit nervous on that day. And I did have some technical problems the first time that I had Ken Shamrock on. And then his team was nice, like, hey, let's just re-record it. And so I was able to re-record another one, with him. It turned out a lot better. But, I was nervous in that day. But I really haven't had that many jerks on my show. Now come to the like MMA fight cider site, the MMA fighters that I've had on my show, most of those guys, they've never done interviews or they've done just a couple, right? And so there are times where I'm interviewing somebody, I'm like, what the hell is he doing? Like I had one guy on my show, I forget who it was and even where he was from, somewhere in the Midwest. But like he did an interview in his bedroom and like he was in front of his bed and there was a guy behind him laying in the bed. And I was like, do you want to move? And he's like, oh no, it's fine. It's just my brother. He's sleeping. Well, like halfway through the interview, the brother wakes up and he goes, where the hell is my jar of mayonnaise? And he's like yelling this. I'm like, what? So the dude gets up, comes back with a jar of mayonnaise and sat behind this guy I'm interviewing the whole time I'm interviewing. He's just spoonfulling mayonnaise into his mouth, dude. I'm like, this is crazy, man.
See, that's so fun to bounce off of, though, like in those situations. I remember like when I first started just in a conference room or in a closet or in my car, just on my phone with like that voice memos app that comes with your phone. Yeah. Starting out and you're thinking like, oh, the AC turns on. It took my roommate maybe 3 years to realize like what I do and that I need silence when I'm talking to people on my computer, always coming in the background with his shirt off. Like, can't do that, man. But you got to roll with the punches. And then you find your own space like we do now.
Right. Absolutely.
So what's, your biggest plan moving forward, with the show and whatever business else you got going on? I don't want to take too much of your time today, but whether it be with the Top Rated MMA podcast or with the Erik Allen Show or anything else you got going on, what's your biggest, project moving forward, and who would you like to do it with?
Man, lots of cool stuff in the pipeline. Last week I was in San Diego for Prosperity Camp with Greg Reed. He wrote like 118 books. Got to meet so many awesome people, and I've got just a stacked set of shows coming out for the Erik Allen Show. So I'm going to continue to do Top Rated MMA Show and continue to do the Erik Allen Show, both currently right now. And I don't know when that's going to end. I'm just going to do it until I'm not having fun anymore. So we're going to keep doing both shows. But I'm also doing voiceover work, so I cover a lot of like voiceover motivational videos. People hire me to do that. I do brand videos, so companies will send me their products and want me to do a video, box opening, reviews, stuff like that. So I'm really enjoying doing that part of it. And then I'm also going to do some more speaking. I'm really excited to get more into public speaking and do some virtual stages and physical stages here in 2021 and 2022, and really take just my entrepreneurial efforts to a whole new level. The goal for me is to, be able to walk away from my full-time job that I still have probably within the next 12 months.
I mean, that's everybody's dream, to walk away from their full-time jobs, right?
Yeah.
Do what you want to do what you love. What exactly do you want to speak out for when you do public speaking events? Because obviously we talked about, Jim the Rookie Morris. He has mastered that, I think, over the past 20 years, telling his story. What exactly would you be sharing with your audience?
One of the things that I talk about is not letting our past define our future, or anyone else's opinion of you define your future, right? So like, I came from that crazy household, but there's a lot of people who went through that. But a lot of people hold on to it. And I did forever too. I'm 41 now. I didn't share my story until I was 39. So I really just want to impress and talk with people that, help them realize that, you can do anything that you want, and you can make a choice at any moment. When I decided to get sober, I literally decided I was going to get sober, and I never turned back. That was 17 years ago.
Wow.
Quick cold turkey. And so I love talking about that. I love talking about the morning routines. I'm big on morning routines. I'm big on, mindset, and how do you get away from that, the yuck, and continue to get on the path of staying consistent with releasing shows and committing to things and sticking with it. So that's what I speak on right now. And that'll grow over the years. But I think that's like my big keynote speaker, sort of set that I talk about right now.
Right. You'll develop those skills over time. Like the first time you step out there, it might not hit the way that you wanted it to, mentally
Totally.
Thinking like, oh, this is going to be like, this is exactly what I'm going to hit, this point, that point, that point. And then all of a sudden you just don't connect with your audience. Nothing clicks. And then you just got to keep going from the experiences that you have. Right.
Yeah. One of the things that I had to do over the years was I had to realize that, I had to be a quitter. I had to quit being lazy. I had to quit thinking I didn't deserve success or money or a great marriage. And I had to quit quitting because I'd started all this business and I quit when it got tough, and so now I have the mindset and I have a vision board and I read over it every day. And that helps me get up. I wake up at 4 a.m., 6 days a week. That really helps me start the day fresh. If I can open my eyes, there's win number one. If I make my bed, there's 2 wins in 15 seconds. It's going to be an awesome day, man.
I mean, that's awesome stuff, man. And where can we find your show again? Again, the Erik Allen Show. We'll see if Zach puts it up correctly this time.
Yeah, no problem, man. It's just erikallenmedia.com is the website, but we're on all formats.
On all formats.
Yep. So YouTube, IGTV, Facebook, Apple, Spotify, Audible, you name it, we're on there, man.
Well, that's awesome. And again, the Erik Allen Show, the Top Rated MMA Show, Mr. Erik Allen. Thanks so much again, man, for coming on and just, shooting the breeze with me these past 45 minutes. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, man, it's such an honor to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity. People need to be listening to your show. You're obviously kicking ass. You've got almost 400 episodes out, dude. Not many people in the podcast world can make it that far. Not even I think 90% barely make it to episode 100. So you're out there showing them how it's done, man. Keep doing your thing, man.
Never give up, never quit. This was episode 389 of The O Show. Thanks for watching.